Hello, a very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Well, it's a wet Wednesday morning here in Lagos. I'm Kayode Okikele.
Well, we're grateful for the rains.
Yeah.
Good morning. Welcome to Channels Television, Sunrise Daily. I'm Bukola Samuel Wenimo.
And from Abuja, good morning. I don't know about rains here. It's the rainy season, though. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Yeah. So we're going to go right ahead today again and take you right through the dailies. We've got Dr. Marcel Mbamalo, who is the publisher Prime Business Africa. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you, Chamberlain.
Well, let's start with New Telegraph. They've got a businessy kind of headline. So, but not a good one for the country. We're not smiling on this one. Nigeria loses 706.72 billion naira claim against JP Morgan. That's a huge sum in no small terms. And then the writer here says, as UK court rules FG not defrauded in OPL 245 deal, absolves Adoke Etete of complicity. Ooh. How did you see this?
Well, rules of engagement. You know, the court has spoken, and once the court speaks, I think there still should be room for appeal. Government can go for an appeal, but I don't think it's a very good one for Nigeria at this moment. I think, like I said earlier, the rules of engagement actually is very clear. The transfer or the sale of the OML, I think OML 10 to
OPL 245.
Okay, and the sale, according to the court, actually followed due process and the transfer of ownership transparent enough. So I think it's not something we worry about. Maybe we'll appeal and see how it goes.
Wow, because it's almost the second, another judgment going against the country, but you know, but anyway, it shouldn't matter whichever government is in place. So as long as it's a case concerning Nigeria,
it's government. Government is a continuum, and it's Nigeria. As a matter of fact, it's Nigeria. It's against all of us. So we all lost, not just the president.
Well, I'm sure there'll be other dailies and more focus on this one as we progress. But some other headlines here. If I could just go above that lead story, because it's an economic matter, equally important. World Bank, economic hardship to push additional 1 million Nigerians into poverty by 2022. Fuel subsidy to gulp 5 trillion naira. And if you check, this is 2022, isn't it? So what? Additional 1 million Nigerians. I know the president, made that promise as the amount of people he wants to bring out of poverty. And now, it looks as if it's going...
2015 or 2019? Oh.
He said it, it's not 2019.
It's 2019.
2019.
And then 100 million people out of poverty.
It's been a recurring.
It's supposed to be a continuum, that target. But now, World Bank is giving us some indices in terms of the figures. They're saying, look, this economic hardship is pushing additional 1 million Nigerians into poverty by 2020.
By 2020?
2022, sorry.
By 2022. Yes, of course. What do you expect, Chamberlain? I think, looking at all the odds against not just Nigeria, but Africa, even the COVID-19, we weren't prepared. When the economy was not actually doing as good as it ought to, even before the COVID came, and the COVID came and wasn't the whole situation in the sense that, of course, some businesses are doing well because of COVID, like tech, but generally speaking, productivity actually dropped so much because of COVID and because of... I sound like I'm speaking for government now because government will always tell you it's COVID. They always blame COVID for everything. But I think we are not...
But before COVID,
look at...
we were in dire straits.
Yeah, of course, we were already
in dire straits. The economy was in recession. I think we've been in recession in this admin for about 3 times.
Yes,
That's the largest any government has experienced recession.
Yeah, we really need to have a state of emergency on economy in this country because a lot of things have to be done. And as I always said, if we need to have a break, we have to look at our SMEs, look at how we can revitalize SMEs, and because that's the only way you can create jobs and tackle poverty.
And to make this a lot more challenging, election year around the corner.
Yep.
And I remember Dr. Aganga.
And we are spending heavy.
Aganga said at that time that, look, when it comes to, he was Minister of Planning during Jonathan's time, he says, look, once it comes to election period, there's usually that lull in government. Things, you don't focus on so many things, and so activities dwindle. And so now, enforcement of some of these policies, probably this might just be a lot more than 1 million Nigerians.
Yeah, we started much earlier than we should have in terms of politicking, actually, because I think this started even last year, you know, in terms of...
and we'll have a longer time.
Yes. So,
much more than we've ever had in recent times.
Yeah, but we had a long... I'm not talking about politicians, actually, took the stage much earlier than necessary. That's the point I'm making.
They did?
Okay.
And, yes, they did, actually, and the governance stopped much earlier than it should have. You know, because expected that pre-election year you have this kind of lull, but the law started much earlier than expected. That's the point I was making, because a lot of issues, ding-dong, a lot of blame games, a lot of inactions, and with insecurity. So I think that's our own is complicated. Talking about Nigeria.
But can we say the same for the federal government? Because the president is not running for election or re-election in any case. So, I mean, he has time to focus.
His party is running.
That's not him.
His party is running, and you know, well, if you look at the terrain, the political terrain, you see that we are in a situation whereby even the body language would determine certain things. So even
body language
talking about,
again.
yes, of course. So the president, whether he's running or he's not running, it's a key factor in. It's not going to have to do with his own party.
I'm talking about body language. You know, at the Democracy Day parade, the president signed the register without giving a speech. What does that body language say, if it says anything at all?
It says as much as you know. Yeah. So that's it.
Well, speaking about politics, look at the bottom strip. 2023, Muslim tickets will be most insensitive Catholic bishops. Turns out this is going to be a thing. Who knows?
So I don't know why we're even discussing that. Doesn't that sound funny as you're reading it?
But it's a reality,
you know,
isn't it? So
reality.
That's a stark reality, you know, facing us. And then you see, okay, well,
it's funny that in Nigeria of today we should be that insensitive. You know, talking about, I know religion, you know, but in other kind of other climes, you might be talking about, okay, it doesn't matter, competence, but in Nigeria, and with what we have passed through in the last 3 to 4 years, especially, I don't want to say in the last 7 years, in the last 3 to 4 years specifically, you know, it's very, very imperative that we, you know, think about. In fact, we become religious, kind of sensitive to religion and ethnicity, actually.
Because we need to call these things out the way they are. Because
of course,
if we don't, we'll gloss over them and think that they are not important, but they are.
I don't think APC or PDP will, at this time, think about Christian ticket or Muslim ticket. I don't think
for
any
instance,
party will do that. I think they're flying the kites, yeah.
But the way we focus on religion here, sometimes you wonder, isn't it going against when we talk about developments? Because if you look at Saudi Arabia, Israel, look at those two countries that we focus on a lot more in terms of religion. Look at how development thrives in those climes. Why not here?
Yeah, it's like comparing apple and oranges, actually. We're talking about Israel.
Religion is religion.
Yeah, religion is religion, but they have more a kind of uniformity in a kind of... we are more... let me say not divided, we are more...
So I'm saying in spite of the religion that we also profess, why can't we be like that?
Yeah, I think when you get to Israel, for example, you have, I think about 80% of them practice, is it Judaism?
But it's also a very religiously diverse country.
Pardon?
It's also a very religiously diverse country, you know, Israel.
Yeah, it is.
Yet it's very developed.
Yeah, are you talking about Israel and Palestine or whatever? In Israel, the minorities are so minor. The minority religion in Israel are so minor that they are manageable, you can manage. In Nigeria, you have two major religions. You have Christianity, you have Islam. And then you talk about those who are non-aligned people.
No, you have traditionalists.
Yeah, traditionalists.
They tell you they
call them
have
non-aligned. Non-aligned.
So
Right?
is there anything about the outlook?
They are not traditionalized, actually.
They are.
Traditionalists are not
they'll tell you
traditionalists.
they are.
Who is the chief traditionalist of Nigeria, for example?
Is there any,
Are you sure you want to know?
I want to know.
But is there anything about the attitude, the outlook to religion in that country that Nigeria perhaps can learn from and adopt?
Israel, for example?
Yes.
Yes, of course. I think it's first and foremost is the elevation of the mind. With education, I think we need to rev up our education system and do something. If an educated man is an empowered man, religion or no religion, our problem is illiteracy. Forget that. You say we're educated, but we are really not educated. So if we are really informed and our mind is so elevated, I don't think we'll have problem with whether diversified or divergent or whatever. We still have to live together and work together as one country. Well, Israel is doing that because of elevation of the mind, education, mindset.
Incidentally, ASO has been on strike for 4 months and 1 day. So,
Speaking of the mind.
Well, let's turn our attention to the Nigerian Tribune quickly. This is what you find there. Quite different, really, but this is a major one as well. Southwest governors raise questions over Owo attack. And there's a statement in quotes. You're the champion of the Amotekun in the Southwest. We, your brothers, wonder if this is more personal because of the role you have played in ensuring that our zone is secure. One wonders if there's a particular reason this attack was launched in your hometown of Owo. So I imagine this statement is directed at the governor of Ondo State, Rotimi Akeredolu. But it's important to get the proper context of this statement. But page 8, this statement speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's trying to extol, or it's trying to blame.
Should I take it again just for...
Yeah, just please do.
Okay, so the statement says, you are the champion of the Amotekun in the Southwest.
Okay.
We, your brothers, wonder if this is more personal because of the role you have played in ensuring that our zone is secure. One wonders if there's a particular reason this attack was launched in your hometown of Owo.
Yeah, I think it's still that kind of... conspiracy theory. I think people are looking at the schools of thought have actually looked at that. Okay, why is it because of the even the APC National Convention was coming up? I think it was that a day before that thing happened. So a lot of people were actually thinking that perhaps it's politically motivated. People have their opinion and could say but for me, I call it a terrorist attack. It's terrorism, and it's the same way churches were attacked. And I think there was one in Abuja, I think 2 years or 3 years ago, like that. It's the same.
So essentially the authorities should go after the perpetrators, arrest them and prosecute them regardless.
Exactly. And one thing I need to say about our security, the way our security apparatus deal with this kind of problem is that we don't have to expose our strategy. Because I listened even to the police chiefs talking, and they will tell you, we have done this, we do this movement at this time of the day, this and and then you release the information you have. Police shouldn't be.
They do that?
But yes, I watched a video about how the police was talking about the movements and how they are going to contain it and everything on television. So I think the best thing, you blow your strategy by the time you keep talking about what you do, because you want to prove that you are doing something about that. Solve the problem. When the problem is solved, you see that you've done something and you're doing something. You don't need to convince the public that you're doing something with security, because the people you're talking to could actually also be the perpetrators of the crime.
Okay,
so we don't know who have done this.
Sorry, Kadi, as much as this is bold, it also appears veiled. Like it's directed at something or someone. Could the Southwest governors have been more categorical about what they were trying to say?
Actually saying that, actually trying to. I think there is. I don't want to align with that. I don't want to say yes to it, and I don't want to say no to it. Anything with security, anything is possible. It could be what the governors are saying. It could not be. It may not be.
Okay.
So that's the point.
Well, a couple of other stories on the front page. Because of time, by the way, Atiku's running mate, Wike, edges others. Quite interesting. A few hours ahead. And for the APC,
it's interesting to see how Wike is going to work with that.
To make Uzodinma APC governors meet Buhari, as well as other stories on the front page. Let's leave it there for the Nigerian Tribune.
All right, so from the Nigerian Tribune, let's flip the script to Vanguard newspapers, and it leads with politics. VP slot, PDP committee picks Wike Tinubu will decide, says Imo governor. Now, how 13 of 17 PDP committee members chose Wike, that's the rider, more from the riders, will name running mate in 48 hours. Ayu, attributed to Ayu. Tinubu, not APC governors, will choose running mate. That's from Uzodimma, the Imo State governor. Muslim ticket, bad for peace, unity. That's emanating from the Catholic Secretariat. Anyways, we're going to say something about how interesting Wike will work with Atiku. So go ahead.
Yes, of course, it's going to be interesting. And of course, Wike has shown to be very, very strong in terms of his campaign to becoming the candidate for the PDP. And he lost. And I didn't see him then working very well with Atiku. And I think it's a matter of expediency. They want to win the election at all costs. But whether that decision, northeast, south-south ticket, is the game changer now, is a different kettle of fish. Let's see what is going to come out from. There are three. Is a three-horse whatever now. You have the three-horse race. You have the Labour Party, you have the PDP, and you have the APC, P2B, Atiku, and then the running mates will actually be the deciding factor.
Yeah.
Yes, and so Wike, good choice because Wike is strong in the south-south. Wike is strong for an Atiku. Wike is strong, and I think it's good for them. It's good for them.
Yeah, let's see how much fruit this expediency will bear. Yeah. Let's take it now to Malpa in Abuja.
Well, thank you, Buki. Let's quickly look at what Daily Trust has on the front page, and they seem to be following in the same train of thought. Everyone is preoccupied with the VP position this morning. 2 days to INEC's deadline, Wike wins PDP Advisory Council poll as running mate. Tinubu will choose his VP, that's from Uzodimma, APC governor's mum after meeting Buhari. President takes decisions without cabal. That's from Garba Shehu. And we're not in alliance talks. That's from NNPP. So two of the stories I'd like to highlight, even you've already focused largely on the VP for the VP candidate for the PDP. That's a major headline. Wike wins PDP Advisory Council poll as running mate. But look at this. President takes decisions without cabal. That's from the president's aide. Why do you think it is expedient that they have to say this at this time? There's been a lot of talk in recent times, but it looks like something has certainly rubbed off the wrong way for us to be getting this response from Mr. Garba Shehu.
Well, a lot of things. I think it's interesting. It's been interesting hearing such responses because, of course, for me, whether it's right for the presidency to issue a statement to say, oh, we don't have a cabal or not, it's debatable. But for me, I don't think there is much need for that for now because for me, it gives that impression that perhaps there's something you feel not comfortable about that's happening, especially given what has happened in APC when they were trying to pick their candidate. Talking about the Tinubu's emergence, a lot of things happened before finally what appeared the democratic process took place and he emerged. So I wouldn't blame the presidency so much for issuing that because there has been a lot of a cloudy situation surrounding the political party which the president represents in terms of how they run up to their selection of candidates. And so to that extent, that is explainable. That's okay. And then with other things happening in the economy and all of this, to whom much is given, much is expected. We will expect more explanations in other spheres, more serious areas of governance for now. Like the areas of security, like the areas of the economy and those. I think that's where, you know, taking the president is not expected. In fact, the president is actually expected to take, what type of cabal you're talking about, take decision with cabal, actually, if you look at it from, because he has a cabal of ministers, he has a cabal of whatever. So it depends on which type of cabal, actually, if you look at it. That's why I say it depends on how you want to look at the statements released by federal government, you know, by the presidency. So,
well, it does seem that they were not particularly pleased. They were not particularly pleased with a lot of the opinion that came off the back of the emergence of Bola Tinubu, yes, as the APC presidential candidate of the party. But I want you to also respond to this particular rider. We're not in alliance talks.
Yes. That's
from NNPP. There had been some talk, yes, that perhaps they will be in some, maybe some alliance with the Labour Party or maybe some other party. It was not clear, but it looks like there is some clarity now from the NNPP saying that nothing of the sort is going on.
Yeah, actually I was about to come into that because, but you know, with politicians anything is possible. Something may come up in the next 20 minutes. Or even or 10 minutes. So you never, before the APC convention, you never knew how it was going to play out until Tinubu emerged suddenly. Before you heard that Senate president was announced, this and that, until finally they knew where they were going. So I think specifically the Labour Party with its candidate, Peter Obi, there's been talk about him trying, and people were looking at it as a very good arrangement. And Obi and Kwakwanso. That was just the calculation people were making all over the social media and all of those. So it's right. And what do you expect? There should be a statement, official statement, actually. Whether that's, what I'm saying is that a statement by the NNPP does not actually dismiss the fact that it could happen. Yeah. With politicians, anything could happen. What is important is the interest and how to win the election, and that's what they're looking at. So, but if it happens, I think that would be a very good, formidable arrangement to have a three. Nigerians would like to have very strong contenders for this position in 2023 and take the right decision on who will govern them, because the stakes are high and a lot of things have happened, and they need whether to continue with change or to change the change or to look elsewhere. I think it's okay. So, but that statement is a statement, and it remains there until the deadline for submission of VP names to INEC. I think it's tomorrow,
The 17th of June?
Yeah.
I believe, yes. 17th of June.
Yeah, it's a Friday, day after tomorrow. So until day after tomorrow, anything
can happen.
Possible, and it's interesting. I'm enjoying watching it.
All right, then we'll take a look at Daily Times next. Oh,
it's papers.
Okay, I kind of missed that though. All right, the Daily Times says APC presidential primary, Buhari's decisions not influenced by cabal ascribed to the presidency, and so they shed a lot more light on that one, saying president's decision to allow open contest at the event shows he's far from an autocratic leader. But look beneath that story, MRA, Media Rights Agenda, I reckon, rejects FG's attempts to regulate social media through the back door. That's the way they think it is, through the back door. Is that the way you see it?
Well, that has always been
that directive.
We've been on that terrain for a long time, back and forth.
To be or not to be?
Yeah, to be or not to be. But I can tell you autocratically it's not going to happen. You know, and it can't happen. You know, and
but they need that directive stance.
Yeah. Yes. The point I'm making is that you know, trying to social media, you know, the problem we have. That's why sometimes the resistance to government is weak, because the social media itself has its own challenges. You know,
so what exactly do you say will not happen? Regulating social media, or what?
Regulating social media.
Yeah.
The social media should be regulated, but it can't be regulated in the manner the government wants to do.
Have you seen that statement from NITA?
I haven't really read. I haven't gone through through that complete. But if you could throw light on that.
Essentially, it says they had a meeting, or at least they agreed with other social media platforms, and then the conditions to really operate include establishing a legal entity, registering with CAC, appointing a designated country representative, abiding by all regulatory demands after establishing a legal presence. The interesting part is provide information to authorities on harmful accounts, suspected botnets, troll groups, and other coordinated disinformation networks, and deleting any information that violates Nigerian law within an agreed time.
For me, that's wrong. Do you accept it? Do you think it's...
But this was part of the condition preceding the allowing them to continue operating in Nigeria.
What?
So if they accepted it, it means they are good to go, those media companies.
But I don't think they should. I don't think they will. If they have...
They already did. That's why the government lifted the ban.
Then we are in trouble.
What kind of trouble?
We're in trouble. The kind of trouble you can imagine. And
but isn't this long line of regulation, you know, required for information management and for some form of sanity in the social media space?
No. Social media, that's not the kind of what happens in other climes. You know, how is social media managed? You know, that why do we learn? We only take the negative. We don't learn the positive things that we should learn from other climes. You know, you can't. It's just like asking people not to. It's freedom of speech. Yeah. Social media is freedom of speech.
So don't touch our Twitter, don't touch our Facebook. Just
at all.
Let us have the town hall.
I don't think so. Okay. I don't think so.
Wait. What do you mean you don't think so? They shouldn't regulate, or they shouldn't stifle?
They shouldn't stifle. Regulation is there's self-regulation.
So you see this as stifling?
Regulation is already there. It's embedded. You know, there's no company that exists in any clime or come to any country that doesn't follow due process. For example, of course, if you're going to register a company, if you have an existing company abroad in the US and you want to have a subsidiary in Nigeria, you go through the CAC, you do the normal things that you are supposed to do and all of those. So the government knows you, the regulators know you, and they know you're operating. So, and then there are other ways, but saying the content, managing content, you know, what you read there, there is clear attempt to actually manage to control content, social media content, and that's not going to happen. Even if it passes through, how is government? Does government have the capacity to even manage it, to regulate it? It cannot. So that's why I say it can't happen. It can happen legally, legitimately they're able to do that, get the law passed. How many laws has this government or has all our governments passed that have been able to follow through and actually whatever? So it's not going to, social media is so vast, it's so big, it's so self-independent, it's so good, it's so, I don't know what to call it, that government, an African government cannot.
Well, we're not in isolation. We've seen even Western countries also clamp down on these social media platforms, calling them to account, or tasking them further, saying they have dropped their guard. We see that with questions about racism. We see that with several perspectives, how they want to hold those platforms a lot more to the rules. But it's going to be an unending argument, I tell you, whichever way you look at it. But I guess media scholars or institutions may have a thing or two about this. Hey guys, go do town hall and get to hear people's perspective about social media. Don't forget, it's important. Your students need to do something about this. Dr. Marcel will be available. I speak on his behalf. Thank you for coming on this morning, Dr. Marcel Mbamalu, publisher of Prime Business Africa. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. We're turning our attention to that case. Yeah, not the first, I'm sure, that lots of focus on this matter. And as you may have seen, that Dr. Ayodele Oni joins us this morning to shed some light on that particular case. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today on the program.
Good morning.
Well, Dr. Ni is a partner in the Energy Practice Group of Bloomfield, LP, and then you're also a commercial lawyer with expertise in energy law and policy. Now, this happens to be your forte. There's been lots of tongue wagging about this case. Understandably, you know why Nigeria is emotional about it. Say, why in the world will this go against us? Haven't looked at the precedents, the grounds upon Nigeria's appeal on this matter. They thought, but wait a minute, we should have a case here. But you've seen all of this. How did it come across to you?
Well, I felt it was a reasonably fair decision. Remember, commerce, trade, banking should not be caged. You need to, the concept is a concept of what's reasonable, reasonableness. So were there reasonable grounds to suspect fraud? Maybe we couldn't prove. It's usually on the preponderance of evidence. Maybe we couldn't show sufficient evidence that it was that way, that there was reasonable grounds for JP Morgan to suspect that funds were going to be dissipated or there was fraud. Of course, you've got the chance to appeal. I think it would be with the leave of the court. You can't appeal. I think it's a 21-day period where we have the right to seek the leave of court to appeal. I'm not sure appeal is of right. Under the law, you've got two types of
Talk us through Nigeria's grounds for this particular matter. The grounds that we cited, because we thought we had a case. Looking at the precedents and how the matter played out in other claims, we said, look, I haven't seen this. The court, I mean, the bank, Nigeria argued, should have seen that there were enough notice of risk on this matter, even though we saw what the judge said, well, it was kind of slim. But did you think that, looking at that, we had a chance?
Yeah, of course, we have a chance, but it's not sufficient that you have a chance. You need to prove that to the court. The judge was probably not satisfied, but I'll take you back to the PINID case, which in this case was an arbitral award, arbitration, and then we had the opportunity to appeal, and we did succeed. So that says we cannot, in this instance, also succeed. However, it appears that we weren't able to substantiate the claim that there were reasonable grounds. I think that's the key thing. If we couldn't substantiate that there were reasonable grounds, judges usually don't make decisions on emotions or what social media or what the claimant believes. You need to then prove. I'm not saying that's the end, but maybe we didn't do enough to prove. I wasn't in court, but you know, it would appear from what I did read that we probably didn't do enough to prove that there were reasonable grounds.
If you could get some sort of history to this, this is 2022 really, and this dates back to as far back as 1998 really. A lot of people were probably not even born there or were not politically aware. What is OPL 245? What is the case about? So perhaps you could walk us through some of the, I don't know, do I say facts now, or some of the, you know, timelines of this. Perhaps that can help to now further the conversation.
Okay, I'll do that. In 1998, you had the Abacha administration, and you had Dan Etete as Minister of Petroleum. At that point, we were speaking about giving indigenous companies more rights to produce in the oil and gas industry. And then OPL 245, known as an oil prospecting license, under the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Act, was given to Malabu. And it's a deep offshore block. And typical of deep offshore blocks, you will get technical partners. In many cases, you assign 40% interest to those technical partners. And I understand Shell was technical partner at that point. So you had that given. Around 2001, you then had democracy in 1999, where you had Obasanjo, and it was revoked. And by 2003, that same block was then given to Shell. I think it had partners, Ajip and Eni. And around 2003, again, there were disputes, and then government sought to give it back to Malabu. At that point, Shell, now there were two owners, Shell went to Ekiti, International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. And at that point, Shell went around 2002, 2005, 2006. Then by 2011, because of the back and forth and the disputes, you then had, so it went from Abacha to Obasanjo and then to the administration of Jonathan. In 2011, a settlement decision was reached that Shell, together with its partners, will pay about $1.3 billion. And some of those sums will then be paid to Malabu to settle Malabu. And then Shell and its partners could take over completely the asset. Remember that the Shell was already technical partner under that block, because it was a production sharing contract. The way production sharing contracts work is that you'd either have the NNPC or an indigenous company own the asset, but you then have a contractor, capital C, not your typical contractor, come to work the asset. Because remember, at that time, deep offshore was a frontier. It was relatively new. We didn't have the technology. So even though indigenous companies owned those assets, they didn't have the capacity to work the assets. So they had to get international. Go and check all of the PSCs. You see that they were mostly, at least in the beginning, international oil companies who were the contractors.
PSC,
so the contractors, PSCs, the production sharing contracts. They will work the assets, and if oil was found, they will share. They were entitled to share in that oil. That's why it's a production. What you produce, sharing, you share. And a contract.
Right.
So that's the history. So under that settlement agreement in 2011, payments were made, and that's where the problem is. The depository account was opened with JP Morgan, and funds were moved shortly after. Yes.
Could you also, talk about the Milan trials to the Malabu oil scandal as it relates to this, so that we have a more comprehensive outlook to it? Yes. Okay.
So the Milan trial was in Italy, and at that time, you had experts, you even had Dr. Ayoade of Unilag come to give testimony as to illegality of the process. But during the military, it was difficult to debate illegality because you also had people who were giving assets on the whim, not based on laws. You had discretionary awards. So during that process, at the end, the court held that Eni in particular and its partners were not liable for any wrongdoing.
We lost all the district.
We lost. Yeah, we lost in Washington. We lost in Milan. We've continued to lose, and then we faced the bank and then lost. But that's not to say we cannot appeal successfully, particularly the one against JP Morgan.
Okay, so let's talk about the costs now. I know that we're looking at over $1 billion, and that's big money, especially now as a nation. I know what we can do with
over 20% of what was appropriated for paying debts this year, over 3 trillion.
Yeah. So you know how important over $1 billion is. Yes. Let's talk about the cost, really, because there was a talk about certain $20 million for OPL 245, maybe $2 million was paid. Then eventually it skyrocketed, and now it's been said that property that was not paid for essentially is trying to be. Just explain that part, because it's a tricky one.
Yes, I would explain. So initially the asset was supposed to be bought for $20 million, if I recall, but only $2 million was paid by Malabu. So at the time in 2003, when the asset was now going to be given to Shell bought it for $201 million. You're speaking of an asset that we believe should have about 9 billion barrels. What some people have said is probably worth $500 billion. You can imagine going for just 200 million. So I think that's part of the challenge with the government. This asset is worth so much, and we're getting so very little, including signature bonus. I think the signature bonus at the end of the day was $201 million. So it's a far cry from the value of the asset. That's where the challenge also is.
Could you tell us what is the key thing here? Because Washington, Italy, now this. We lost all these cases. What do you think is missing here? What are we getting wrong?
Well, I can't say for certain, but I think it may also be the representation. I'm not casting aspersions, but it may also be the representation. If you have someone who is not an expert fighting your case, he may be a good litigator, but if you do not have experts in that sector supporting, it's not sufficient for you to have a good case.
But even with
okay.
But even with the possibility of lack of expertise, the judge in his ruling acknowledged the risk of money laundering in the transfers, and in fact said that JP Morgan could have done things differently. So instead of ruling in favor of the defendants now, could the judge have called for further investigation, because it appears as if the verdict is self-contradicting?
Okay, judges usually don't jump into the arena. It's on the preponderance of evidence. If you do not provide sufficient evidence, the judge might have his own personal views, but he wouldn't make decisions usually on his own personal views. Those may have formed some of his views. That's why when you have judgment, you'd have the ratio decidendi, the reasoning behind the judgment. And the reasoning will be from your facts and the analysis, which is a different thing from what you feel personally. It's just like a judge who's been raped before and you bring a rape case. That female may have, particularly when it's female, that female judge may have her own views. But if on the preponderance of evidence and what the Evidence Act does say, you do not provide sufficient proof,
right.
That's it.
What was the second point you were going to make?
I think I've forgotten that point now.
Okay, because you had built on the first one, whether or not you have a good case, your representation will be key.
Okay, your representation will be key, and at times, time lag. Some of that evidence may have been lost, some of the memory, some of it may have been forgotten. Someone may have made a mistake. You may have changed representation, and then you lose some of.
Because in this particular one, JP Morgan argued that the previous government didn't see anything wrong with it. Then this government comes in and sees something wrong. So could it be that they saw a gaping hole there, and then they're latching onto it? Because ordinarily, that shouldn't matter, should it?
Oh, no, ordinarily, that shouldn't matter. That's another thing around technicalities at times. If you've got smart lawyers, you may shout and argue. Someone brings a very important technical point and knocks out everything else you've said. So government is a continuum. Personnel changes, but government is a continuum. So you then may begin to debate if these guys found nothing wrong in it, what then changed? Could it be political? Could it have a political correlation? I'm not saying that's what it is.
Right. That's what they insinuate.
Yes, but you could insinuate political correlation. And because remember that there's something called judicial notice. Judges take notice of the happenings in a country. If they feel there's some witch hunting, oh yes, they call it judicial notice.
Wait,
judicial.
even if it's not brought before the court?
Yes, there's judicial notice. It's not necessarily brought before the court, but there's judicial notice. So this is different from factual information. There's judicial notice. Judges are expected to understand context and all of that, and they may say, okay, you know what, in this instance, this happened, maybe there's political witch hunt. I'm not saying that's the case. You know, so many things form a decision beyond you just saying it's black or white. There are other things that may bear in the minds of the court. Together, and most importantly, the facts, the evidence brought before the court, and the rule. The rule in the Barclays case and Queen's Care is particularly reasonable. The concept is around, there must be, you must reasonably believe. You give me, they're signatories to an account. They sign that money should be transferred. The first thing I'm not thinking of, the first thing I've been thinking about would probably not be corruption. You understand? If nothing else on the face of the document suggests that.
But Dr. Oni, so let's take a look at this Queen's Care duty, because there's money laundering, there's fraud, and then it looks like this case is built around this Queen's Care duty, essentially saying JP Morgan should have, and this Queen's Care duty essentially says a banker must refrain from executing an order if and for so long as the banker is put on inquiry, in the sense that he has reasonable grounds, although not necessarily proof, for believing that the order is an attempt to misappropriate the funds of the company, well, in this case, of the country. So we have a precedence. We've had the Danny Tete case, you know, dragging on for that long. And this essentially happened in 2011. 11 years ago, yes, you talked about time being another issue. But essentially, in fact, if you read through the judgment, there were you know, points that the judge made herself, saying that, well, it was established that this indeed happened in the past, and then you probably had red flags, reasonable doubts, which is why you should have acted differently. So maybe we should have built our case around money laundering and fraud, not the Queen's Care duty, because it looks like that was where this case fell through.
The judge is not going to build your case for you. The judge is going to decide based on what you provide and what you ask for, what you seek, because it would be a basis for an appeal if the judge grants you something you did not ask for. 1. 2, remember that the judge speaks directly to what you provide to the judge. If you do not provide anything outside the Queen's Care. 3, remember other decisions have been made that have suggested that any Shell, many of those guys did no wrong. So if you put all of this together, you could decide one way or the other. That's the truth about law. You would always, they may go on appeal, and I suggest government does go on appeal and win, because there are statements from that decision that you can latch on.
Such as?
Some of what he said around the judge suggesting that there could have been cause for money laundering and all of that. But the question then is, if you didn't really bring those up and provide sufficient proof in relation to same.
So how do you relate to the fact that when it was, because they said it was even in 2013, that the bank was reasonably put on notice that there could be notice of risk in this matter, and the judge said, well, it was nothing more than slim. And so
Foundation.
there was just nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, so, you know, the thing is, if you rely on there are frivolous situations. You know, that's why when you do certain things, they would ask you if you're a politically exposed person. The fact that you're politically exposed doesn't mean everything you do should be queried. But once it's politics, people always suggest or insinuate that something must be amiss. So otherwise, commerce will come to ground, you ground commerce, you ground banking, you ground all sorts. Imagine that you're doing a deal, and because there is some suggestion that something is going wrong, they hold on to your money, and you can't close your deal, and that's a life-changing deal. The bank can't transfer funds, and you lose that deal. Remember when the telecoms deal, when Globacom couldn't pay International Investment Limited or something. If you remember that time, First Bank, they couldn't transfer funds, and they lost the deal, and they lost the money. That's what kicked out the MD at that time. So, you know, those sorts of scenarios also play. Remember, judges are human beings. Those sort of scenarios. Otherwise, at every whim, you just say, that's the end.
Now I noted that you said that the judge sometimes takes judicial notice of what happens in another country. In this case, now you're referring to Nigeria. But now, this is not necessarily Nigeria, but amid this case, 2 foreign nationals were convicted in Milan, separate from the Malabu oil case. Could this have had any bearing on the case if the judge had taken note of this?
Yes, it could have. It could have.
Why didn't it have any bearing?
That's why you'd have grounds to appeal. Is facts such as those. You know, so it depends on who you speak to. You could always find 2 sides to any story, particularly when you deal with lawyers. So there are, I believe strongly that there are grounds for appeal. I'm not sure how the case was prosecuted and who did that, but I believe there are grounds for appeal. I believe that you can't do that with the leave of the court, and we may just succeed. I can't say for certain. But
and also, you talked
both ways.
You talked about the challenge of the military era and why the case could not be pursued at that time. But afterwards, you know, Nigeria had since progressed to democracy, but it chose to pursue the case outside its legal jurisdiction. Is it one of those things that worked against the case?
Okay, interesting point is that when you have such arrangements, you can have escrow accounts, you can have depository accounts, whatever it is, agreements. Those agreements, there's something known as choice of law and jurisdiction and all of that, seat of jurisdiction. I believe that it may be that that agreement stated that any dispute arising from that agreement will be under English law and will be adjudicated upon by English courts. So in that case, you do not have a choice. You can't bring it to Nigeria. You can bring other matters, criminal matters against certain individuals, but with respect to that particular case, because it's a basic principle of contract, parties are bound by the terms of their contract, including governing law and jurisdiction. So I think what would have happened is that depository agreement or escrow agreement, whatever it was, decision, English law and jurisdiction, seat of jurisdiction must have been in England and English courts. That's why it's that case. So it's not necessarily the case, because you could also debate, and part of the reasons they may have wanted English courts is because they think they may be biased by Nigerian courts.
Okay. You know,
and you see that at times, you know.
You see the irony. The Foreign Act of State Doctrine came up again, and essentially says that you cannot rule or give a judgment when it comes to another sovereign state, even though now, anyway, this judgment is binding on a sovereign state, which is Nigeria. So I don't want to call them contradictions, but quite tricky, really.
There's what is known as the waiver of sovereign immunity, generally. You know, in contracts, if you remember, I think it's the Azura case. You remember that debate around money and sovereign immunity and all of that. In contracts now, when you do international deals, there'll be clauses for you to waive sovereign immunity. And once you waive your right, you have waived it. So that's what normally knocks off that. So you can waive sovereign immunity.
What then happens? Because going through the judgment, you see names like Danny Tete repeated time and again. I mean, you think that it was a third defendant, or you see names like even former AGF, Adoke mentioned. And you know, we've had cases on this. So what does it do to the, I don't know, the cases surrounding them? Does this essentially say, okay, well, they are free or they are vindicated in this? Because I think it has some effect. Because their names were mentioned quite a number of times. Okay,
this matter is specific to the issues raised therein. Is with respect to did they legitimately transfer? Should they have transferred those funds? It will be separate from a criminal trial, and it doesn't necessarily stop. You know, more often than not, you also have issues around time lag. When someone does something within a period of time, you can bring it to court, the exceptions in criminal law and all of those. So it shouldn't necessarily prevent, but it may weigh in the minds of the judge. But Nigerian courts have an interesting way of doing things. I'm a lawyer, so I need to be careful what I say about courts and judges. I'm not indicting, but nothing stops them. Yeah, they definitely could do better. I'm sure you know they can do better.
But please, where is the money? Pardon me. Over $1 billion. And it was wired through JP Morgan anyway. So
that money looks like the money is gone.
That's too big of money to disappear.
Well, the judgment is there. So
it looks like the money is gone.
But moving forward, as we wind down, what should Nigeria be doing now?
First interesting thing is what the Petroleum Industry Act has done. Before you grant PPLs, I think there are PPLs and PMLs now, you require the recommendation of the commission. It's not unlike what you had before. The president, like the president, the current president is the Minister of Petroleum. You do know there's a Minister of State, but he's the Minister of Petroleum. Yeah. Then you have discretionary awards. You can just give discretionary awards. The concept of that is almost non-existent now. It's been whittled down, and you require the recommendation of the commission, first leg. So in the first place, you ensure that we get what's right. For me, if Nigeria did make $15 billion, whatever it is, from that sale, no one would really care about all of this. Because remember, you continue to get taxes and royalties. So that's the first thing. Ensure that things are done properly. Secondly, put your best foot forward. Whatever you want to go into international arbitration. Remember the P&ID case. Remember the indictment around the prosecution of the case. Recall the indictment. Always put your best foot forward when issues like this come up, and always exercise your right of appeal. So those things. And
are you confident that the Petroleum Industry Act has taken care of this, such that when negotiations are done, they're not done in isolation now, you know, with just the Minister of Oil acting individually and all of that?
I always say to people, Nigeria's problem is not laws. If you have the best laws in the world and you have mischievous people implementing those laws, doesn't really matter. But yes, the Petroleum Act has done quite a bit, but doesn't cover the entire field, in my view. But as long as there'll always be if you find the smartest people in the room, they'll always find lacuna in any law, anywhere in the world. So it's about not having mischievous people implement your laws. If you have bad laws implemented by good people, you'd have better results than good laws implemented by bad people. So I think it's not so much about the implementation, but our orientation.
All right, so there you go. Dr. Ayodele Oni is a partner in the Energy Practice Group of Bloomfield and LP, and is a commercial lawyer with expertise in energy law and policy. Thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And good book, Understanding Nigeria's Electricity Markets.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're back in a moment. Don't go away.
Sometimes when you scale up this issue about violence, it has its consequence on voter turnout. And politicians like to raise that, so that the more people don't come out, the more it is easier to manipulate the electoral process. So we are more interested in inspiring confidence in the voters that they should come out to vote, and if they come out to vote, the opportunity for manipulation and rigging of elections will gradually go down. The politicians are finding way around the new innovations that INEC is putting in place. So if you are reconfiguring the polling booths, it means that it's going to be difficult to pay voters on E-Day, on election day. So the new way is to get back to their houses in the bid to campaign to them and then induce them.
On election technology, we have reviewed the functionality of the bimodal voter accreditation system, the BVAS, following complaints received from the recent area council elections in the FCT held on the 12th of February 2022. For the first time, the Commission deployed the Automated Biometric Identification System, the AVIS, which is a comprehensive and robust system involving not just the fingerprint identification, but also facial biometric recognition. The lessons learned from the most recent by-elections have been taken into consideration as we prepare for the forthcoming Ekiti and Osun governorship elections. The Commission has finished the configuration of the BVAS for the Ekiti governorship election. To further ensure optimal performance of the BVAS on election day, the Commission will undertake a mock voter accreditation exercise in Ekiti State ahead of the governorship election on 18th June 2022.
Welcome back. Welcome back. It's election season, so you expect quite a number of things will be playing themselves out. Ekiti, for instance, you know the political parties are rallying themselves, as they always do, to see how they could clinch the top seat in this state. So we're focusing on Ekiti elections now, and a lot of things going on behind the scenes, part of which we'll be hosting Most Reverend Matthew Hassan Kuka, who is the convener, National Peace Committee. He joins us from Ekiti virtually. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us on the program today. Okay, I didn't hear that. Could you please unmute so that we can hear it?
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, nice.
All right, I'm sorry. Yeah, good morning from Ekiti, and good to be here.
How is the weather in Ekiti? I hope everything is okay where you are.
Raining, but you know, when you come from Sokoto, you appreciate every drop of rain. So the weather is very cool, beautiful. I hope it's a foretaste of good things to come.
Well, we hope so too, but more so when it has to do with peace initiatives, peace committees, and peaceful undertakings, as your group is going on with now. So just take us through that. What is going to happen soon, today, as a matter of fact?
Well, thank you very much. I'm here. The chairman of the National Peace Committee, General Abdul Salam, who normally leads us, it's unavoidably absent. But I'm here on behalf of the Peace Committee, and we do what we've always done, largely to support INEC and also to handhold and encourage the key actors, and then encourage our good people to ensure that only the living can benefit from the processes of democracy, and then to ensure that people play the game according to the rules. It's about the best we can do. So we're here largely to extend the good voices of Nigerians, and then to let the people of Ekiti know that Nigerians are solidly behind them, and the Peace Committee represents, the good people of Nigeria.
I know you may have responded to this question in different fashion or context, but from previous peace committee initiatives and undertakings that different politicians have subjected themselves to or signed up to, have you seen any marginal or significant difference or fundamental difference in all of those processes that they've put themselves through in terms of how it has impacted the elections and the conduct of candidates to the elections?
Well, I think that maybe let me just take you back a little bit to 2015, and let me repeat what I've said severally. The name of our committee was National Committee for the 2015 elections. So essentially, we were supposed to, when I was asked to convene what is now the Peace Committee, the idea was for us to just see how we can encourage the key actors at that time. You remember that this took place against a backdrop of a lot of anxiety and fear as to whether Nigeria was going to survive the 2015 elections. Successfully and thankfully to God, that came to be. And we had a wide consultation across media, civil society groups. We spoke to the Senate President, the Speaker of the House of Assembly. We met with former President Jonathan. We met with President Buhari, the newly elected president. And all we were saying was, look, did you think the Peace Committee should we just shake hands and go home? And right across the length and breadth of Nigeria, I think all of us, beginning with myself, we are quite shocked by the overwhelming outpouring of good intentions. So we are then asked to continue, and this is where we have now found ourselves. So to answer your question directly, I think that there has been a measurable improvement, and this improvement is not something that the Peace Committee can claim credit for. But I think in fairness to ordinary Nigerians, we can see that increasingly Nigerians have become and are becoming very enthusiastic about the processes. We've also seen a reduction, in the overbearing engagement of the security agencies. So this opening up of the political space is not something you can attribute to only one body. I think it's an orchestra of voices of goodwill across the country, beginning with INEC, civil society groups, the good people of Nigeria, and really the political actors. But our worry has always been the messaging processes, the body languages of the political actors themselves, on whose behalf we all stand in the rain, in the sun, to perform this activity. So really, it is the political actors themselves that are very, very much behind in terms of, ensuring compliance, to the things that they are signing on to.
The last election we saw, the governorship election in Anambra State, there was a lot of apprehension. And I think a lot of people even clamored for some sort of agreement, peaceful agreement, between the candidates, essentially, because of the build-up. But in the case of Ekiti State, I think a few days ago we had this clash between supporters. It was quite bloody, really. So for Ekiti now, what have you been noticing? Just how, do I say precarious or otherwise, is the situation in Ekiti State for this election?
And I don't want to hold the media responsible, but sometimes we engage in scaremongering, and the realities that the media report often over-dramatize the issues on the ground. We were told, for example, that Edo was going to come apart. We went to Edo. I had a lot of people calling me and telling me not to put my life, in danger by going to Edo. We went to Edo. The people of Edo conducted themselves in an amazingly beautiful manner. We had credible, fair, election, results without any significant incidents. The same thing happened in Ondo. The same thing happened in Anambra. So I think the media must become a bit more circumspect, because sometimes the amount of scaremongering about the prospects for violence always don't match the realities on the ground. I think that the people of Ekiti, from what I saw yesterday, and I must confess, I didn't see much, but civil society people that have been here on the ground, the staff of the Kuka Center and the Peace Committee, all have given, they've not shown any reason for people to feel anxious about the realities on the ground. And I think Ekiti, in fairness to them, they've been quite relatively peaceful, as far as the issues of violence that we have seen across the country is concerned. So we expect that people are going to conduct themselves in the way and manner that ensures that everybody votes and goes home peacefully and quietly. So I don't expect any major incident. But again, like I say, it is the political actors that should be held responsible. And again, we're trying to explore the possibility of injecting some kind of consequential, attitude, or a consequential, how will I put it? The people, the actors themselves may have to live with the consequences of violence that they trigger if it is established, that particular actors were responsible for, particular outcomes. We've been on this for a very long time, even before during the Always Committee. What do you do? How do you penalize actors, who have seemed to be involved in instigating violence during elections? But I think it is a work in progress. Like I said, I expect that this will be fair, free and fair here.
Well, this case that I mentioned is particularly predicated or premised on the clash we saw over the weekend in Itaji. And that's essentially what we report, the facts, not trying to sensationalize, just report the facts. And it's important to have those facts, put it out there so those in charge from security agencies, government, and even the umpire, as well as your committee can, of course, take that on board and perhaps use that to champion a cause that can ensure we have a peaceful election. So essentially, this is based on reported facts, not sensationalism. I just wonder, really, when do you think we'll come to the point where we don't need to, sign a peace pact and all of that? Because it's, it's implied that once you say you want to vie for an office, or even if you want to elect someone as a voter, you're essentially saying you would abide by the rules, the constitution that that govern elections in the country. It's implicit. So when do you think we'll get to that point where we really don't need to come out and sign these accords?
Well, it's almost like saying, when are we going to come to a day that we will not need the road safety? When are we going to come to a day in which people getting married will probably just shake hands and they don't have to sign a marriage register? Desirable as this is, we must also be aware of where we are. We hope that we'll get to that point. But frankly, it's too early in the day in our democracy. And also, I think I would like the point to be made very clearly that the Peace Committee is actually a beneficiary of an aggregate of initiatives on the ground: cultural groups, community groups, civil society groups, situation. A lot of groundwork has always been done over a period of time. And as you can see from the enthusiasm of our people in trying to get the PVCs, it seems that by the day our people and our democracy are all maturing. The challenge really is for the political actors to walk the talk, for the political actors to become more responsible and more responsive to the wishes of ordinary Nigerians. Ordinary citizens are well ahead of the political actors in terms of what they want, how they see things, and they understand the issues. And the fingers of manipulation by the political elite at the highest level, this is what creates the confusion. So yes, we are working in that direction. But as you can see from the amendments that are taking place in the electoral law, these are the things that will inspire greater confidence. And I think gradually, as Nigerians, as the quality of people's lives increases, people can then become a bit more relaxed. But for now, politics in Nigeria and Africa is bound to be a bit tense, precisely because of the nature of the sharing of the political benefits. So when people in power continue to practice nepotism, when people feel that they have voted and the people who are benefiting are those who have just come out of the comfort of their rooms, they're bound to feel frustrated. These are the ingredients for violence in Nigerian politics. So I can only say that we will hope we are working towards that.
Father, in reference to Kade's position. Indeed, those reports of violence on the convoy of a particular candidate took place. Now, in relation to that, would it make any difference if these peace accords were signed a bit earlier in the day? Because just before your trip to Ekiti, that incident had happened. And going by the conduct of political parties and their candidates during elections, it would seem as if the signing of peace accords are perfunctory. If you went by what happened in the last governorship election in Kogi State, the political parties indeed signed peace accords, but you know, we all are witnesses today to what happened in Kogi State. So would it make any difference if these peace accords are signed a bit earlier in the day before or amid the campaigns? And then what are the terms of reference in this peace accords? You talked about consequences. Would it make any difference also if these consequences are applied almost immediately?
Thank you very much. Fantastic question. I can really answer the question by saying, look, I served as a member of the Ways Committee that we tried to review the electoral laws and so on. The problem really has been that even some of the actors and some of the participants in these processes, they see the dangers that are posed by all these crises. But right now, INEC continues to wrestle with these problems about who is responsible for what. The security agencies tell you we're here to just keep order. INEC doesn't have the capacity, and INEC is overwhelmed, with court cases and so on and so on and so forth. So, your question is spot on. But remember, as I said, we did not anticipate that we'll be here up to now. Now, the issue of whether the Peace Committee can be responsible, or either perhaps even appear as a witness, will depend on how political actors, take the results of these processes. So I think that your question is valid. It's something we should be thinking about. But this is not this nation is not short of laws. The question is the lack of goodwill to implement the laws. But I think definitely I agree with you that yes, and we are contemplating that it is we should be able to get the people to sign the accord well before the elections, and then perhaps just close to the elections. So I agree with you. We are exploring all kinds of other dynamics, to improve this process. And a question like yours is quite valid. And like I said, these are some of the issues that we hope that we can continue to look at. So we can refine this process in a way and manner that doesn't create alternative platforms, but simply harmonizes the objectives of the electoral body, which is principally saddled with, conducting, elections.
At some point in when Professor Jega was chairman of INEC, the elections were postponed for some time. And now, during this current INEC chairman, it was also postponed for some time. And then he says, look, the country needs to have a conversation about election management. And some suggested, do we then need to unbundle INEC? What do you think should be central to that conversation if and when we have it?
The problem with the Nigerian situation is that the sinners are the ones who are trying to make the laws. These are the consequences of where we find ourselves now, because this is political science. It is political science, and it is political theory. So, and I speak to the fact that as long as the universities are the way they are, as long as we do not privilege intellect and the diagnostic tools required to refine processes, as long as we are required, we are hoping that politicians will be the ones to set their own rules, as long as we expect that almost all of this is all politics, the people in the National Assembly are focusing on their political benefit. I saw the Speaker of the House lamenting about the fact that 170 members are not going to come back. In fact, very few Nigerians will worry if everybody doesn't even come back. Because the quality of leadership that we are seeing leaves so much to be desired. So, in my view, had it been we have a situation, a country that is working, a country that takes research seriously, it is the business of political science. The people in power, the political actors, with the required tools, for analysis in terms of the options that are available to ensure that things go the way they go. But unfortunately, if you have a situation in which the universities are not funded, the country itself behaves as if it wants to close universities. As you can see, we are now under the government of the bandits who have not gone to school. So this tells you the troubling environment around which democracy is being practiced in Nigeria. So unless and until this government and other governments in Nigeria take academic exercises sufficiently seriously, we cannot expect the person who is sick to be the one to provide the medicine for his cure. So for me, it's a valid point, but the work of INEC should be pretty serious. It requires serious intellectual rigor. We're not seeing that, instead, as I said, the lawmakers who are supposed to be focusing on Nigeria are focusing on their political opportunities and their political parties. And these are supposed to be just platforms. The higher goals should be how to fix and how to build our country. But unfortunately, we have people who are just concerned with their own opportunities and privileges. This is why every time we try to make new laws, people are thinking of their privileges as opposed to what is good for the nation.
Well, there was a very interesting point made yesterday by Chamberlain, actually, and it was just in passing about, we were talking about the peace accord, and he was of the opinion that, will there be a clause, maybe, that talks about, the political actors, the candidates not engaging in voter inducement or vote buying and all of that, because that's also something that undermines the integrity and even the peaceful conduct of elections. So is that something you're planning to maybe impress on them? So maybe if they can append their signature to it, at least their conscience can prick them.
The Catholic Church defines conscience as a sanctuary in which you are alone with your God. The problem with Nigeria is that we are invoking God even when we really don't need to invoke God. If you go to the National Assembly, quite a good number of members of the National Assembly are pastors. There are a good number of governors, key political actors that have invaded our territory as priests. But the point to make in answer to your question, which actually I didn't answer the question that your colleague asked about Kogi, and the penalties. But it is again to make the point that in reality, a body such as ours is severely constrained, in terms of what it can do. But the problem with Nigerians is that we think that, if something doesn't go well, create another committee to investigate why things didn't go well. And when you receive the report and things don't go well, create another committee. The point to make in answer to the question is that, yes, you're perfectly right. We need an aggregate of ideas and suggestions as to how to strengthen this whole thing. Because even we in the Peace Committee are worried about, is this just something that people do perfunctorily, or should it have a bite? Now, to answer that question, the Peace Committee cannot answer that question. It doesn't have the powers to take anybody to court. Again, this should be the conversation, a broader conversation between academicians, researchers, policymakers, and the people who are going to execute these decisions, the judiciary and so on. So it's a baggage of a lot of things. Unfortunately, when we finish elections, everybody goes to sleep and waits for the next elections to come. So in between, this is where we should be having this, some of these conversations. So I appreciate the questions, and the Peace Committee will take very seriously the issue that you've raised, but we'll continue to do the little we can do within the limitations of what are set up, where we are not being set up by law. Ours is purely and simply just a gathering of volunteers who are terribly busy, and they've just come together to do a good thing for their nation.
Which is highly commendable, Bishop Coker, the fact that you have made peace a mandate, especially peace in our electoral process. But would you really say that it is fair to say that the media is the one who heightens the scare around violence? The 2015 elections, you saw the need, you as well as other well-meaning people saw the need to talk about peace and, form the committee which you formed. Was that as a result of the media?
Yeah, I know the media gets very defensive of my way, and I understand where you're coming from. But let me correct the point I made. I was not talking about reporting events as let's say, the crisis that happened here. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in almost each and every one of these processes, we have had projections of the prospects of violence. Now, and my point is that I think all of us can have a conversation about this, because so what happens between these projections and the realities? Because like I said, Anambra, I had so many people, including people from Anambra, who told me not to come to Anambra. I had people who told me not to go to, and members of the peace committee, not to go to Edo. We had the same projection. I'm simply saying, and I don't discount the fact that we are the mirror of society and so on. I'm not talking about reporting events at the time they happen. I'm talking about the nature of the projections, because it cannot be that somehow after all these projections about Nigeria is going to collapse, Nigeria is going to collapse, and the collapse of Nigeria is an impending reality, and then suddenly the clouds all disappear. Now, if that happens, we should ask ourselves the question. Maybe somebody paid the witch, the real doctor, and we don't know. But I think as a post-fact analysis, from the point of view of post-fact analysis, we should be able to ask ourselves, no, were there things we didn't see correctly? What did we see differently? What did we project differently? Did we speak to people enough? So for me, it's not a blame about the media and its ability to report. It's the nature of the projections that we make. And I'm just saying that it must be very interesting that every time we make these projections, oh, happily, NEPA has struck.
All right, so I was just thinking, well, you know, the concept of repentance, when the media puts out those messages and the people repent, God forgives them. What happened? Well, that might have been a scenario that plays out. All right.
Well, hold on, Chamberlain. Last time
I didn't know you were back, actually.
Yeah, thank you. I got you there. No. God doesn't just forgive automatically. You know, we in the Catholic Church have a pretty sophisticated way of how God forgives. You know, and if you indulge me, I tell a little anecdote, you know, about a man who, when people think that the priest, somebody just goes to confession and confesses and the priest simply blesses him. No, a lot of interrogation goes on at the confessional. Because this guy goes to the priest and he says, Father, please, forgive, I have sinned. You know, and Father says, well, go ahead. And he says, you know, I stole a rope. And the priest says, okay, what kind of rope did you steal? Is it from a rope maker? And the guy said, well, yeah, no, it's not a rope maker, because if it's from a rope maker, then your penalty will be a little bit minimal. He says, no, so where did you steal the rope? He said, well, this rope was actually, I found it near a tree. And he said, okay, so was it abandoned? He said, no, it wasn't abandoned. Long story short, the man stole a goat. But because the goat, he started by simply saying he stole a rope. Now the goat was tied to a rope. Had there been no interrogation, you know, will not hear the truth. So God's forgiveness is not automatic. It is contingent on a lot of things. One, that you, the sinner, realizes the gravity of your sin, and you, the sinner, promises that by the grace of God, you will not sin again. You will not repeat the same sin because you realize its gravity. It is on the basis of that the priest doesn't forgive, invokes God's blessings and grace to use him as an instrument to pray for you and hope that you become a better Christian. In our own case, the people who are sinning are actually sinning even more. And that is why I often tell people, when people tell me to pray for them, I say, let me know what you want me to pray for you for. Because all of us have to agree. So it's not, I mean, the forgiveness is not as easy. But in Nigeria, I think what we need are stiffer punishments, not invocation of God. You know, on this matter, I say to people scandalously, God doesn't have a ballot box. God doesn't vote. We are the ones who are voting. So account to us. All of us will account before God, but until we get there, we Nigerians are asking you to account to us. If you wanted to account to God, if you want another life, go and become a priest. But this is not, politicians must be told that they are responsible to the people of Nigeria. So all this talk about fear of God, I often say to them, it doesn't matter to me. Do what needs to be done. Whether you fear God or you don't fear God, you will settle with God. But for now, it is fixing the roads and giving us water and stopping the lights from going up as they just did. That's what we are voting people to do on our behalf.
Bishop, it would seem as if we all need to ask for forgiveness. Speaking of some category of people in the mix as well, I imagine that during these peace accords, the body language of those you're taking your appeal to is one of sensibility and, in fact, maybe a concession to the terms of reference of the peace accord. But really, perhaps they're not the ones the message is designed for, because they're not actually the ones that go to the streets, you know, to perpetrate the violence. The violence is perpetrated by proxy. Doesn't that leave us in a precarious and seemingly helpless situation, Bishop?
Well, you know, this conversation belongs to all of us, really. It belongs to all of us. And very often we are barking at the wrong tree. And I think this is where civil society, which is doing a fantastic job, also needs to do a bit more, because we need to inflate the sense of patriotism, commitment of our ordinary people. Community groups, community associations, religious groups, you know, we need to be having this conversation as to what really constitutes good governance. I mean, will NEPA ever repent to Nigerians for not supplying us electricity? Whose fault is it? Will anybody ever repent or apologize to us for not giving us water? You know, these are the issues. And as I said, the challenge for us in Nigeria is that we have still, there are certain aspects of African tradition that are inimical to democracy. So, for example, you know, you cannot talk to governor, you can't ask governor questions, you cannot ask president questions. So we sanctify the people who came kneeling down and begging for our votes. And then after the process is over, real democracy does not arise from the good intentions or the goodwill of the people who are the actors. Every criminal can make a commitment to trying to be good. The real challenge is, are we prepared from the day a man is sworn in or a woman is sworn in to confront, to engage, to bang at the door? Because there is righteous anger, righteous indignation. And very often Nigerians think that others can do those things on their behalf. It is not so. So for me, it doesn't matter what kind of signature people append to this whole thing. The real challenge is, are we prepared to confront them with the fact that this is what they signed on to?
Okay.
So these are the important issues.
All right, Bishop, we need to wrap up, but if you could just in a few seconds, is there any word about the priests who were kidnapped in Sokoto?
Thank you very much for asking that question. The word is that, you know the way this is, you just keep negotiating with the bandits and they will decide what they want to decide. They're asking us to pay money we cannot afford to pay. So we are on a wing and a prayer, and that's where we are. But thank you very much for asking.
All right, we also do thank you very much indeed for coming on and for the job you do. Even now in Ekiti, Most Reverend Matthew Hassan Kuka, convener, National Peace Committee.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Well, back in a moment. Stay with us.
Well, precisely, that's what we're talking about, Nigeria's leadership recruitment process. But we're going to bring it down to something that's currently happening, and reflected in almost all of the dailies. The fact that a lot of the frontline candidates are looking for their running mates, and there's been that search going on. What should be the criteria? What should political parties be looking at? Is it different from some of the balancing acts which they are trying to bring out now? Well, we have with us this morning Dr. Sharif Gali, who is an associate professor and head of Department of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Abuja. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
Well, I'm sure that you have been watching what had happened with the primaries of political parties, both big and small. I do not know if any of them have pulled any surprises for you.
It wasn't actually a big surprise, because the metamorphosis that has been actually unfolding in Nigerian politics is not a kind of political achievement or historical result which have been achieved previously by politicians, but it's largely dependent on what you are able to present to the electorate. So therefore, having Atiku Abubakar within the PDP, who has been able to galvanize, the delegate with full resources, as well as on the other side, Bola Tinubu. So not surprising, because these are not new, within the framework of Nigerian politics. But one major issue that we always try to emphasize is the leadership recruitment, which is emanating from the already
victorious presidential flag bearers. So now what we expect is the vice presidential slot as well as running mate. So what I actually try to advocate, as always, is the concept or the notion of to be or not to be. To be or not to be, in the sense that this entity is called Nigeria. And our leaders, you know, initially they developed a kind of good concept, which was unity in diversity. You know, we are diverse, but we should try to remain united.
Do you think that we have placed hurdles in front of, I mean, I'm going to come to the fact that some people have said that there has been an uneven playing field within the political parties. It has seen quite a number of them, you know, leave to start to, you know, to other political parties. And in the political parties where they are, they seem to be making quite a mark with the larger Nigerian populace. So do you think that first, within political parties, there has been an even playing field? Some people talk about the role that money played or continues to play in our politics and the hurdles that we have set. So for instance, within political parties, there was a talk of this rotation, north-south divide. Now in the choice of vice president, there is the religious balancing act and of course the ethnic balancing act. It will seem that it's only after we have crossed these hurdles do we then begin to talk about competence, whether the people can really carry out the job which we need them to carry out.
Yes, of course. In each and every region of Nigeria, we have competent people, because there is no reason from which you cannot actually see people who can lead. So therefore, but the issue here is that how do we remain just and fair, you know, to ourselves? Why? Because all the conflicts and crises we see around the world are a result of injustice as well as exclusion, political, social, and even economic exclusion. So what we are advocating, you know, in Nigeria is we want a kind of a politics of inclusion. Let everybody be represented fully across the board. So that is why if you look at this particular, but before I get into this, let me answer that particular question. You know, we have a kind of political cartel. Those who think that they are the only ones, you know, who deserve to govern. And any other person should actually wait, not now. And this particular set of people, they have actually succeeded in spreading the tentacles of, political structure, as well as try to generate and garner support, you know, from across board. So, but what we are saying is that...
do they belong to one political party, this cartel which you speak of?
Yeah, no, the cartel, you know, we have political party or parties, you know, with the notion of cartelism. Why is it so? They try to actually get support by all means, either politically or economically, without necessarily looking at ideology. But what I'm trying to say here is that those who feel rejected and they have no position within a political party, they develop that particular sense of resentment, which they navigate from that particular political party to one that they can actually have a better chance. For example, Dr. Senator Rabiu Musa Konkoso, who left the PDP to APC, back to PDP again, and now in NNPP. So, but what we are saying here is that, now I come back to the issue of competence. What we want is each and every region of Nigeria be fully represented. Let each and every region have sense of belonging. Not every region, because Nigerians are quite you know, conscious in terms of religion. And somebody who might not fight because of ethnicity or tribalism can actually fight because of religion in Nigeria. So if religion is so sensitive, why don't we critically handle it well in order for peaceful coexistence and stability of our entity, Nigeria? What I'm saying here is that if you look at all the zoning, all the zones, each and every zone has been represented in this particular issue of vice presidential seat. If you look at the Northeast, for example, Atiku was a vice president. Coming down to the northwest, Namadi Sambo was a vice president, you know, under Ebele Jonathan. If you go back to, let's say, southwest, even the current vice president, you know, Professor Emil Sibanjo. If you go back to the southeast, we are now referring to Alex Ikweme under Shagari, was a vice president. But there is one particular region which has never, gotten that particular position, which is the north central. And this is a part. The issue of churchinity and mosquinity, I said this yesterday, churchinity and mosquinity in the sense that the two major religions, forgive me if I do not include the traditionalists, because these are the two major ones. Churchinity and mosquinity cannot actually exist, you know, in isolation. They have to be combined. Why? Because the Christians and Muslims live together in Nigeria as citizens of Nigeria. And having Christian population, more than 80 million, you know, in this particular country, then they should also be what? Represented. What am I saying here is that I am against the Muslim-Muslim ticket. Why? Because if you jettison the concept of justice, fairness, unity, as well as inclusiveness in terms of political journey, then you are actually forgetting about the veritable tenet, the principle that was actually the vanguard for the foundation that brought out this particular country and bring us together. So what I'm saying here is that Muslim-Muslim ticket has not been part of Nigeria's foundation. If you go back to the First Republic, we had Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, the Prime Minister. Some people will
talk about how, just to interrupt you, we just recently celebrated Democracy Day, June 12th, honoring let's say the labels of our heroes past. Moshood Kashimawo Abiola ran on a Muslim ticket. And he was said to be the winner of the June 12th election, an election that was seen to be the fairest election for a long time in Nigeria. So when you talk about how it has not been a part of Nigeria, some people will beg to disagree.
No. We cannot say completely not part of the journey. But predominantly speaking, it has not been an issue of concern. Even the June 12 was aborted, you know, and it did not actually come to reality. But it has been part of what Nigerians remember, as well as sympathize with ourselves, because the June 12 election, which was, considered to be fair, had been actually cancelled and annulled. You know, it was a kind of unfortunate political situation for an entity. But all the democratic regimes...
The question is Nigerians did not mind at that time. When did they begin to mind?
You see, Nigerians, after, let me say, that particular annulment of June 12, eventually we began to experience that particular issue of claimer, that we've been marginalized, we've been excluded, you know. Remember with the annulment of June 12, remember the Yoruba nation, our brothers and sisters in the Southwest, you know, they took it seriously because it is our man who actually won this particular election, but why annulling this particular election? And from that particular point, that particular division, ethnic, what I can actually call identicambellism, which is literally ethnic and tribal recognition or nationalism. So that started growing in Nigeria, and people come to realize that, look, we need to actually see ourselves as one, and each and every religion, each and every region, each and every people should be represented. If you come back to 1999, after the June 12th, 1999, when Obasanjo came to power, he brought in Atiku Abubakar in order for what? For fairness. Let me not just be the Mr. President, you know, the pilot of the ship, but let us have also other people from another part of the country, also from another religion, because these are the major ones. after that, come down to 2007, when Yar'Adua came to power. He brought in, when Yar'Adua came, he brought in Ebele Jonathan, and they ran together.
When people talk about a Muslim ticket, they're largely referring to the APC, I believe.
Yeah.
Because it does look like someone like the candidate of the PDP doesn't seem to have that sort of problems. In fact, the candidates that are being, you know, touted by the party do look like they're mostly Christians. The Labour Party, former Governor Peter Obi is a Christian. He has the challenge of picking a suitable candidate, perhaps from the north of the country. Rabbi Musa Kwankwanso will have to look down south, you know, and then, you know, I think where the major challenge lies is for the APC candidate, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is from the southwest and is a Muslim. That's, I believe, largely that's what you are referring to.
Yes, of course.
But the question that a lot of people will ask is that if democracy is about numbers and it's about people seeing themselves in government, do you think that if a Christian candidate is picked from the north, would the majority of northern Muslims see themselves represented in him?
Well, you know, the issue of representation and democratic majority, I don't think it's going to work in northern Nigeria, you know, in 2023. Why? Because poverty has already taken over, you know, the society, and people no longer, because it's just in Marxist literature, that man must clothe himself, man must actually shelter himself, and man must actually feed himself before he begins to think of politics, law, and religion. So if man lacks these particular three variables, essentials, man will not even worship God himself, you know, correctly. Man will not obey the law, you know, as you know, he's expected to. Man will not actually function well as a human being if he lacks these particular three essentials. So that is why when it is time for elections, sometimes people are being actually conditioned to actually vote according to financial resources, what Faishe once called stomach infrastructure. So that is what is going to work. I don't see religion going to play politics, because one thing we must look at, the northern governors, you know, unanimously made the decision that let this particular political process be actually zoned back to the south. And when they agree, remember, they are the leaders in their own state. Northern governors, for example, 19 governors or 19 states, and now we even have the leader of this particular northern governors, you know, who is the governor of Plateau State. He's a Christian. Why don't you pick him? We have Muslims and Christians in Plateau State. The crisis that engulfed Plateau State in recent history, when this man came, he tried to actually build peace and bring order and stability in this particular state. So what I'm saying in essence is that northern Nigeria, since you are bringing the vice president from the north, then people will not actually care about, you know, being excluded or the political system being unjust to them. Why? Because somebody from northern Nigeria is there. When the first military coup was actually staged, the coming of Agu Ironsi, you know, from the southeast, which actually brought about the second military coup staged by Gowon. Gowon was from the north. And the northerners, even though Murtala Mohammed thought that Gowon was not from the core northern aspect and not House of Fulani, and he also staged a coup against Gowon. So we have these particular differences as well as division. But the only thing we have to do is to make sure that each and every part of the country is fully represented. People have a sense of belonging and emotional ties. The crisis we saw in former Yugoslavia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Bosnian conflict, you know, there were so many minority enclaves. You know, you think about the Croats, you know, the Albanians, you know, the Macedonians, and the rest of them. But they were actually afraid for the over-dominance of the Serbs, who actually controlled the government and the military. And that's why they started to declare independence.
Well, some people would say that this is just just about one political party, and that, you know, the topics are way broader
the ruling party.
than just, yes, it's still one political party. And that there are so many things to think of. That if we're to talk about this fairness, then it would seem that all the political parties haven't done right, because it would seem that the Southeast has largely been shortchanged. And largely, you know, sentiments should be strong towards the Southeast as we currently speak. How do you think that, looking at the problems that we finally found ourselves, do you think a government of national unity will be what will solve our problems, since we always have this winner takes all in our elections?
Yes, of course. What Nigeria needs to do in this particular critical moment of our political history is to look at the entire regions of this particular entity. It was formerly the North, now going back to the Southwest. Then the next dispensation, 2017, we can actually say, let's go to the Southeast.
2017?
2027, I mean, sorry. So let it go to the southeastern part of the country.
Why do they have to wait that long?
No, because...
Today they have a southeastern candidate.
No. Now the major political party, which is the ruling party, as well as the major opposition party, which is the PDP. In these two political parties, there is no presidential aspirant from the Southeast. But some of them might decide to get vice presidential seat, which earlier they said they do not even want a vice presidential seat, but they want a presidential seat. But my argument here is that power is not actually gotten by force. You can only get power by the barrels of the gun, which is through military coup, or by revolution. But you have to actually engage democratically through consensus, through cooperation, in order to gain power. That is what I expect from our brothers from the Southeast. But what I'm saying here is that, since if you're looking for the seat of president, and the major political parties do not actually harbor any, you know, from that particular region, then you wait for 2027, for example. The Nigerian system, the stakeholders, you know, in the political processes, let us agree also to zone the presidential seat, you know, regardless of the political party, or let me say the major political ruling party. Let it go to the Southeast, because they are also Nigerians. That will actually do away with the acrimony, okay, with this particular sense of secession, you know, that we feel excluded, we are not part of the political processes. Okay, now have it. Let's see how far you can actually play the ball. That will actually do away with tension. And we are all Nigerians. These are the kind of things that we are supposed to do. Give each and every people, region, the opportunity to actually govern. And the three major tribes, you know, which are the Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, and even the minority. Jonathan was a president, you know, look at Babangida, look at, you know, others like Abdul Salam, though under military junta. But what we are saying here, for us Nigerians, not to experience what other people are experiencing around the world. Look at Somalia. 99.something% of Somali population, you know, is Muslim. You know, but as a result of what? The struggle for power among the ethnic nationalities of Somalia up to today, Somalia is not seeing peace. And the Al-Shabaab has taken over.
Which is stronger? Which would you say is stronger in Nigeria, ethnicity or religion?
Religion. Why? Because I can tell you that some people can fight for religion, but they might not fight because of ethnicity. Why is it so? Even though Aidan Campbell says ethnicity as natural.
There are those who will disagree, but we have to wrap up there. We have to thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. I think that is certainly something to consider, and I think our political parties will certainly have a lot to chew on. We have to thank you for coming on this morning. Dr. Sharif Gali is an associate professor and head of Department of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Abuja. Let's quickly go to a few of your messages now, which have come in. Obad, tweeting from at Albui Obadiah, says the Nigerian political leadership recruitment process is faulty. The reason is simply because the political party ideology is not well defined. Even if it is not properly followed. The current leaders should be blamed. Well, that's from Ubedobad. Well,
Ejike's tweet is on that conversation around FR, and that's the federal government of Nigeria versus JP Morgan Chase. It says the Malabu oil deal is another ugly indication of our leaders' historical recklessness in managing the country's resources. According to him, JP Morgan reported the transfers and suspicious transactions. However, someone in government failed, he believes NFRU failed to do their job. Really? It says $1.7 billion. It's gone.
And Festus Akimboyewa is also not happy about the loss of the JP Morgan Chase case. He says that we lost the case against JP Morgan is painful, but we can't blame the judge because governments have poorly managed our oil revenues for decades. FG, that's the federal government, must learn from this judgment and improve the management of oil, our proceeds, and be tougher on corruption in the oil sector. I hope they're listening.
Well, I believe it's a fine place to wrap up this beautiful Wednesday morning. I hear it's wet in Lagos. I hope you have your cup of tea. I also hear it's wet in Ekiti. I guess they're also prepping for the elections. They're gearing up. No matter what the weather is, do have a beautiful day, and thank you for watching. I'm Mal Kwelgun Yusuf.
Don't forget to hold your umbrellas. That's if you're, of course, in Lagos and in other parts where it's raining. Have a fantastic day ahead. I'm Kayode Kikiolu.
Sorry there, Kayode.
No
I couldn't help it. I've learned 2 new words today, churchinity and masculinity. I hope I got it correct. Whatever the case is, I guess we'll have to do a bit more study on that. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
Oh yeah, that's the show today. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.